Welcome back to the All About Everest podcast. I am your host, Pauline Reynolds Nuttall, and today we're focusing on the people who are the heartbeat of Everest, the Sherpas. When people think of Mount Everest, they usually imagine climbers standing at the summit, colorful prayer flags blowing in the wind, and the challenge of climbing the highest mountain on Earth. But the truth is, most of those summits would have never happened without Sherpas. From Tenzing Norgay's partnership with Edmund Hillary in 1953 to Kami Rita Sherpa's record-breaking 31 ascents, Sherpas have carried the loads, fixed the ropes, guided climbers, and saved lives, often at the cost of their own. But before we dive into their history and legacy, let's start with a quick Everest update from this fall season. American climber Tyler Andrews has been making headlines again. He's been trying to do the best no oxygen speed record of Mount Everest. It was supported, but he was pretty much on his own. He did have help with setting up camps and ropes. Last episode, he was on his 5th attempt. He made it to 8,000 meters before turning around. It was his 5th attempt overall this year. The conditions, collapsing ice and unstable snow, there was even an avalanche, forced him back. But Andrews says he hopes to try again. His persistence shows just how difficult and dangerous speed attempts are, especially without supplemental oxygen. And again, 5 times in 1 year, that is still pretty impressive. Looking ahead, German alpinist Jost Kobusch, and I interviewed him, I think last year, has announced plans for another bold attempt, a solo winter ascent of Everest. It'll be his 3rd time, set for late 2026. He has tried this before, and he was not successful both times, using a rarely attempted route on the West Ridge, and his climbs are followed closely by mountaineers around the world, and also followed by us. Winter on Everest is brutally harsh, with frigid winds, deep snow, and almost no summit windows. So if he succeeds, it will be historic. So he has a little over a year to prepare. He had back surgery, I believe, a year ago, and he just recently injured his hand. So while this fall season may have been quiet in terms of overall climbers, there were 2. Everest continues to be a stage for daring and ambitious attempts. All right, now for the rest of the episode. The word Sherpa is often used to describe any guide on Everest, but it's important to understand that Sherpa is first and foremost an ethnic group. The Sherpa people migrated hundreds of years ago from Tibet to the Solu Khumbu region of Nepal, where they settled in the shadow of Everest. Because of centuries of life at high altitude, Sherpas developed unique physiological adaptations, larger lung capacity, efficient oxygen use, and genetic traits that allow them to function at altitudes where many people struggle to even survive. But being Sherpa is more than biology, it's a culture. Sherpas practice Tibetan Buddhism, and the mountains are sacred to them. Everest itself is called Chomolungma in Tibetan and Sagarmatha in Nepali, both names reflecting reverence for the goddess believed to reside in the mountain. So when Sherpas climb, they're not just working. For many, it's a spiritual act, one that requires offerings, prayers, and ceremonies before stepping onto the slopes. And they're really adamant about all of the prayers and the things that they do to bring them luck in their climbs. There's a lot of superstition, and that would make a really good episode to talk about all of the stuff that they do and the spirituality of them climbing Mount Everest. Sherpas first entered the history of Everest in the early 20th century when British expeditions began exploring routes on the mountain. They quickly became essential, not just as porters, but as climbers in their own right. One of the earliest famous names was Ange Tharkay, who supported multiple expeditions in the 1930s. But of course, the most famous Sherpa of all time is Tenzing Norgay. In 1953, Tenzing stood alongside Edmund Hillary when they became the first confirmed climbers to reach the summit of Everest. But what many people forget is that Tenzing had already participated in 6 previous Everest expeditions before that day. So his knowledge of the mountain was priceless. He'd already built his endurance and his skill, and it was so important to the attempt and the success that he made with Hillary. I think that without Tenzing Norgay, Hillary would not have been able to reach the summit. Tenzing became a global hero, not just for reaching the summit, but for representing the strength and determination of the Sherpa people. That moment marked the beginning of worldwide recognition, but it was just a start. And little known fact, if you've never listened to the podcast before, May 29th, 1953 is the day that Tenzing Norgay and Sir Edmund Hillary first summited Mount Everest. And because Tenzing didn't know what his actual birth date was, he adopted May 29th as his birthday. That's also the day that they do the Everest race every single year. Fast forward to today, and Sherpas remain the backbone of Everest expeditions. What do? Pretty much everything. They carry heavy loads of food, tents, and oxygen. They climb ahead of clients to fix ropes and ladders through the dangerous Khumbu Icefall. They establish high camps, cook meals, and often guide climbers every step of the way to the summit. The ice doctors, they're the ones that make the path through the Khumbu Icefall every single year. It is considered probably the most dangerous job in the world. It's a very specialized group. They're hired by the Sagarmatha Pollution Committee, and they set the ropes through the ice fall as well as the aluminum ladders, which are often used. The rope fixing team also, again, it's an all Sherpa crew, and they're the ones that reach the summit first every single year, but it's because they're the ones that fix the ropes for everybody else. Think about this. While many clients climb Everest once in their lifetime, some Sherpas summit multiple times in a single season. Take Kami Rita Sherpa, for example. He holds the world record with 31 successful ascents of Everest. That's more times than most climbers have ever been to base camp, and he has summited multiple times in a season. I believe this year and last year he summited at least twice. I'd have to go back and check my notes. If you want to learn more about him, we do have an episode that we did an interview with him. Other famous Sherpas include Mingma David Sherpa, one of the youngest climbers to summit all 14 of the world's 8,000 meters, and Lhakpa Sherpa, who holds the women's world record with 10 Everest summits. Two other people from the Sherpa community that I would like to talk about. Hari Buddha Magar, we interviewed him as well. He's a double amputee. He's a Gurkha veteran and he got hurt in Afghanistan. And he was the first double amputee to summit Mount Everest. And I've been following him since his first trek to Everest Base Camp. And right now he's shooting for the 7 summits. His interview was amazing, and he just is so inspiring. And another person who some of you might be familiar with, George Sherpa. I interviewed his partner, they're co-owners of AGA, Adriana Brownlee, and he has done so many things. He was part of the K2 Winter Summit team with Nim's Day. And one of the things that he's most known for is that in 2024, he abandoned his summit attempt. He had a client with him to save someone else who had been abandoned by their team, by their guide, and everyone else. It was a really big thing. You can go back to the 2024 recap. We talked about it a bit, how several people were just left stranded, and Gelji just did what he needed to do, and he was able to save that climber. But it's not all about records and triumphs, right? The risks Sherpas take are enormous. In fact, the very first recorded climbing deaths on Everest were Sherpas. 1922, during George Mallory's British expedition, an avalanche struck on the North Col and killed 7 Sherpa porters. That was the first deaths that occurred on the mountain. These men were hired to carry loads for the team, and their deaths were a tragic reminder of how dangerous this mountain has always been. While Mallory and his fellow climbers went home and became legends, the Sherpa families were left with grief, a theme we see repeated throughout Everest history. Some of the deadliest tragedies since then have also impacted Sherpas for the most. In 2014, a massive avalanche in the Khumbu Icefall killed 16 Sherpas in a single morning. And there was a lot of outrage because they were carrying loads through the Khumbu Icefall when this big sarak, which is this massive chunk of ice, just fell on them. And so the mountain was closed down. And even then, there was even more controversy because there was a Chinese woman who decided that she was going to attempt the summit, even though the mountain had been closed down. She took a helicopter, bypassed the Khumbu Icefall. It was so disrespectful and just appalling. You know, for a lot of families that live in that region, the mountaineering jobs are pretty much the only way that they have to support themselves and their families. The jobs don't pay well compared to Western jobs, but for Nepal, they pay extremely well. And what will happen is a lot of them, they'll start working as kitchen help or porters carrying stuff back and forth to base camp, and then they'll start working as high altitude porters, and they'll work on ferrying stuff through the Khumbu Icefall to the higher camps, and then they become guides. And the most fatalities on Mount Everest have been from the Sherpa community. Sherpas are fathers, brothers, mothers, and daughters, and while they're celebrated in climbing circles, they've also fought for fair pay, better insurance, and recognition. Their sacrifices are real, and they should never be forgotten. The role of Sherpas on Everest is changing. In the past, they were mostly seen as support staff, helping Western climbers achieve their dreams. But now, Sherpas are leading their own expeditions, breaking their own records, and stepping into the global spotlight. A great example is the historic winter ascent of K2 in 2021, led entirely by Nepali climbers, whole group from the Sherpa community. That climb was hailed as one of the greatest mountaineering achievements of all time. Today, Sherpas are expedition leaders, entrepreneurs, and cultural ambassadors. Many younger Sherpas are pursuing education, tourism, and careers outside of climbing. But mountaineering remains a proud tradition, and it's also a necessity. The world is beginning to see Sherpas not just as helpers, but as elite mountaineers in their own right, which is exactly what they are. Before we wrap up today's episode, I want to share some recommended reading if you'd like to learn more about the Sherpas of Everest and their incredible legacy. A couple books that I've read, and they're all really good. I've included them in my master list as well. Tigers of the Snow by Jonathan Neal, a fascinating history of Sherpas, their culture, and their central role in Himalaya climbing. The Sherpas of Nepal, Buddhist Highlanders by Christoph van Fuhrer-Heimendorf, a more academic but classic anthropological look into Sherpa life and traditions. Touching My Father's Soul by Jamling Tenzing Norgay, written by the son of Tenzing Norgay. It's a personal, spiritual, and cultural perspective from someone carrying his father's legacy on Everest. Buried in the Sky by Amanda Padwan and Peter Zuckerman. Even though it's a K2 focused book, this book is an eye-opening account of Sherpa and high-altitude workers' experience on 8,000-meter peaks. Sherpa, Stories of Life and Death from the Forgotten Guardians of Everest by Pradeep Bashel and Ankit Babu Adhikari, one of the most recent and moving collections of Sherpa voices. These books highlight the human side of Everest, the resilience, faith, and the strength of the Sherpas who continue to inspire the climbing world. If there's some movies that are you interested in watching, or documentaries, if you will, Sherpa, created in 2015, a must-watch documentary directed by Jennifer Pedam. It tells the story of the Sherpa community through the tragic 2014 avalanche that killed 16 Sherpas, and it powerfully shifts the narrative from Western climbers to the Sherpas themselves. The classic 1998 Everest IMAX movie, while centered on climbers, it features Sherpa contributions and gives a sweeping look at the mountain. The Summit 2012 focused on K2 but includes Sherpa and high altitude porter perspectives, showing the dangers they face across the Himalaya. Of course, 14 Peaks, Nothing is Impossible, and it follows a whole group from the Sherpa community. It follows Nims Purja, also known as Nims Day, and his Nepali team as they summit all 14 of the world's 8,000-meter peaks in record time. And they have proven that they actually did not complete the record that they had attempted to establish. And last but not least, and this is a really good one, also on Netflix, Aftershock, Everest and the Nepal earthquake, covering the 2015 earthquake and its impact on Sherpas, climbers, and local communities. That one gives you a lot of insight into the towns that are in that area. Here's a list of some well-known Sherpas we can highlight alongside Kami Rita, Mingma David, and Lhakpa Sherpa. Apa Sherpa, nicknamed the Super Sherpa, he summited Everest 21 times before retiring, holding the record until surpassed by Kami Rita. He now runs the Apa Sherpa Foundation to support education in Nepal. Purba Tashi Sherpa tied with Apa Sherpa at 21 Everest summits, and he appeared in the Everest Beyond the Limit TV series and was highly respected for his guiding. Russell Bryce really leaned on him and his guidance throughout. If you haven't seen the documentary series, and I think there's like 3 seasons, you definitely should. And Rita Sherpa, known as the Snow Leopard, he summited Everest 10 times without supplemental oxygen, a record that still inspires awe today. And for anyone to summit without oxygen is a huge achievement. Babu Chiri Sherpa set records, including the fastest ascent of Everest, 16 hours, 56 minutes. That's with oxygen. And spending 21 hours on the summit without oxygen before tragically dying on Everest in 2001. And Pasang Lhamu Sherpa, the first Nepali woman to summit Everest in 1993. The sad part is she tragically died on the descent, but remains a national heroine. And again, the first Nepali woman to summit Mount Everest. It's very, very impressive. And that is it for today's episode. I would love to do a more in-depth one eventually about the Sherpa. I want to do it as an interview with someone. And the language barrier is, even for me, because you guys know that I struggle sometimes because I think in multiple languages, the language barrier is a huge thing for some interviews. There were a couple people that I've reached out and they said that their English is just not good enough. And I don't know how to get around it. I know that I know lots of people who know lots of languages, but we're definitely going to have to see. But I think there's definitely more to the history of the Sherpa community, but it's not my story to tell. And as someone who has a pretty specific cultural identity, I want to do it correctly, because if I were to do something like that, I would want it to be correct about my cultural identity, and I don't want to be disrespectful to anyone else. The Sherpas are the backbone of Everest's story. Their courage, skill, and sacrifice make every climb possible. They are more than just guides. They are legends in their own right, and they deserve to be remembered and commended and celebrated, just like the Western climbers. If you enjoyed today's episode, please rate, review, and follow the podcast on your favorite platform. It really helps others discover the show. And again, my ratings kind of tanked because I neglected you guys for over a year. You can also join our free Everest school group, where we're building a community of Everest fans, climbers, and armchair mountaineers, maybe even a book club in the future. Find me online at Mama Bear Outdoors and on social media under All About Everest Podcast. Until next time, climb your own climb, and I'll see you back here soon.